Picture this. The year is 1604. I'm an ambitious Dutch merchant, standing right on the edge of a creaky wooden deck, tasting the literal salt in the air and just staring out at this massive, unpredictable ocean. And look, I'm not here for some quick flip or petty trade. No, I am part of a grand design to build the world's very first true multinational corporation. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to trace the explosive rise and, well, the pretty staggering fall of the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC, specifically in India, and we'll do it entirely through the eyes of the merchants who built it. Now, history loves to fixate on the British, right? But honestly, it was us, the Dutch, who beat them to global dominance. We controlled the trade for almost 150 years. So let's dive into how we built this massive empire of spices and why, today, it's mostly just reduced to stones.
So our actual physical footprint over there, it officially kicks off on November 11th, 1604. The head of our Dutch fleet, Admiral van der Hagen, rolls up to the Malabar Coast and strikes this huge treaty with the Zamorin of Calicut. They actually pledge to support each other as long as the sea and the sun. Now, why such a totally dramatic pledge? Well, because we shared a common enemy. The Zamorin basically wanted to use us to kick the Portuguese out of Malabar, and we wanted exclusive trading rights to pepper. I mean, this stuff was so valuable back then, they literally called it black gold. It wasn't an overnight success, though. Actually, scratch that, it was a long, bloody slog. It took us 57 years and multiple failed attempts to finally boot the Portuguese and secure that precious pepper monopoly. But once our merchants got their foot in the door, oh man, the expansion was incredibly aggressive. Like, while we were busy battling the Portuguese down south, we were simultaneously spreading out across the entire Indian subcontinent. By 1608, we'd sweet-talked the Vijayanagara rulers into letting us build a factory at Pulicat on the east coast. Moved to 1616 and were set up in Surat, the absolute principal port of Gujarat and one of the richest provinces in the mighty Mughal Empire. By 1627, we're all the way in Bengal, setting up shop in Chinsura, Dhaka, and Patna. It's wild. In just over 2 decades, we basically threw this massive corporate net over India. And we weren't just trading pepper anymore. We're talking silk, indigo, and these absolutely sparkling Golconda diamonds. And speaking of treasures, out of everything we exported, there was this one thing called Coromandel chintz. It was this stunningly beautiful, intricately patterned floral calico fabric, and it became an absolute sensation back in Europe. We realized pretty quickly that we had struck a totally different kind of gold with this textile. It became incredibly prized for making traditional dresses for Dutch women. It was this amazing cultural bridge between Indian craftsmanship and Dutch fashion. And what's truly mind-blowing is the longevity of this exchange. Literally today, centuries later, if you travel to the Dutch city of Hindelopen, you'll find artisans still crafting dresses inspired by the exact same chintz designs we imported all the way back in the 1600s. How cool is that?
Section 2. The first corporate giant, making history in Amsterdam.
Now, while our merchants were out there navigating the Coromandel Coast and smoozing in Mughal courts, the sheer amount of wealth pouring in from India transformed the VOC into an absolute corporate behemoth back home in Amsterdam. We didn't just participate in the modern economy, you guys, we practically invented it. Seriously, we were the world's very first limited liability company. When we issued shares at the newly formed Amsterdam Stock Exchange, it was a total sellout. We are talking about the first formal IPO in human history. Merchants from Belgium, Germany, they were literally fighting to get a piece of the action. The stock was traded so heavily that the market had to invent brand new tools just to handle it, birthing things like futures contracts, options, and short selling. But hey, with modern corporate structures come modern corporate headaches, right? In 1622, we faced what was essentially the world's first known shareholder revolt. Yep, investors were convinced the company was cooking the books and loudly demanded a proper financial audit, which, ironically, actually led to the first government regulations of a corporation.
Section 3. Lingering Echoes. The Ghosts of the VOC.
So what lingering echoes did an empire of our massive scale actually leave behind? Well, when we set up those major trading settlements around Bengal, we didn't just trade goods, we traded culture. And a lot of times, that happened over a simple game of cards during our downtime. We brought our vocabulary right to the table. The Dutch words for card suits, Reiten for diamonds, Harten for hearts, and Schopen for spades, they permanently infiltrated the Bengali language. It's crazy, but today, hundreds of years later, millions of Bengali speakers are unknowingly using our 17th century merchants' vocabulary. They say Rithan, Harathan, and Ishkapan every single time they shuffle a deck.
Section 4. The Blueprint of Pondicherry. A borrowed city.
This brings us to another really incredible hidden legacy. When people today think of the charming tourist destination of Pondicherry, they almost immediately think of French architecture, right? The whole colonial French vibe. But the original grid layout beneath those famous picturesque modern streets, that was actually captured and planned by us, the Dutch, in 1693. In 1694, our architect, a guy named Verbermoos, surveyed and laid out this highly structured grid plan for the settlement. When the French regained the city a few years later, in 1699, rather than starting from scratch, they just built their entire city right on top of Verbermoos's brilliant Dutch blueprint. So yeah, that famous French layout of Pondicherry today is, at its very core, a borrowed Dutch design.
Section 5. The Empire Crumbles. Hubris and Bankruptcy.
But of course, no empire, no matter how ridiculously wealthy or well-planned, lasts forever. By the mid-18th century, our seemingly unstoppable company began to rot from the inside out. And honestly, our downfall is a total masterclass in corporate hubris. To keep that demanding Amsterdam stock market happy, the company consistently paid out incredibly high dividends. I mean, sometimes paying out way more money than we were actually earning, leaving us with zero cash reserves for emergencies. Plus, communication with Europe took months back then. That allowed our employees in India to become rampantly corrupt. They were indulging in private trade and just passing all their personal losses onto the company ledger. Then our untouchable military dominance cracked. In 1741, we faced a completely humiliating, crushing defeat at the Battle of Colonial at the hands of the ruler of Travancore. We literally never regained our power in Malabar after that. Finally, the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War against the British came along. They sank our fleets, captured our posts, and plunged our corporate values straight down to zero. By 1799, the world's first global multinational was totally, utterly bankrupt.
1825. That is the year the curtain officially finally closed. The VOC had already been bankrupt for decades, its holdings had been transferred to the Dutch crown, and its trading posts were just left to languish. On March 1, 1825, under the Anglo-Dutch Treaty, every single remaining Dutch possession in India was quietly handed over to the British. With just the stroke of a pen, a century and a half of absolute dominance was effectively wiped off the map.
Section 6. The Opulent Tombs. Monuments in Surat.
Which leaves us to wonder, what physical evidence actually remains of that once unfathomable wealth? Well, if you travel to Surat today, that principal port that used to be just bustling with our ships and Mughal traders, you're not going to find a thriving corporate headquarters. Resting quietly under the Indian sun, you'll find a Dutch cemetery. And the architectural history here is so striking. These aren't just simple headstones. They're opulent, incredibly heavy, dome-like mausoleums built to mimic grand Islamic and European fusion styles. They were explicitly designed to boast our merchants' unimaginable wealth, even in death. But today, these massive structures are just silently weathering away. It's a really sobering reality. The most powerful multinational corporation of the 17th century, an organization that literally invented the stock market as we know it, has basically been reduced to a few scattered stone monuments and the spoken names of a deck of cards in Bengal.
It really makes you think about the permanence of power and wealth, doesn't it? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one thought. We live in an era of massive, global tech and retail giants that feel completely invincible to us right now, much like we felt 400 years ago. So I ask you, when you look at the mega corporations dominating our world today, which ones will leave behind nothing but ghost towns and playing cards centuries from now? Thanks for exploring with us, and keep questioning the history behind the world we see every day.